what has been, besides visiting these places, you also were, you were following Eurovision and reporting on that. What was that like?
Eurovision was back in May, and as I like to say then, when we were just after the first elections of the last 12 months, I like to say that I did not cover the elections, but that Eurovision was my election period, because I had to cover it so closely. And, you know, if you know of Eurovision because you're from Europe or from Israel, you know, it's this song contest of many dozens of countries. But if you're from the States, like I am originally, you never knew about Eurovision until you moved here.
Right, or if you ever visited in the summer and you heard of Dawn International.
Exactly. Dawn International was my first Eurovision.
Okay.
Even though I knew other songs with her, but I think of her as my first Eurovision, because it was this moment where I realized there was this huge song contest and everyone went nuts about it. But then, of course, last year, Israel hosted Eurovision and in Tel Aviv, and I live in Jerusalem, and I moved to Tel Aviv for the week because you had to cover all of these different events, and there were just things that I knew nothing about. Like when you're a reporter, you just assume that you have entry into a lot of things all the time. It's, you know, you have press access. And the first day I get to the huge press hall with hundreds of reporters, and there was the first rehearsal, and I went out to go to the first rehearsal of the Eurovision event, which is one of the things that you cover. And I get to the building where it's going to be held, to the stage, and they say, "Where's your ticket?" And I say, "Ticket? I mean, I'm press. Hello, press." And they said, "Well, no, don't you know anything about Eurovision? You have to apply for the tickets 8 months ahead of time," which I, of course, had no clue. And I thought, I am such a Eurovision newbie. But it turns out that the press room, which was a huge hangar with, you know, like restaurants and lots of desks, and each country of press had their own table set up with their own flags and their own costumes, and they're all, of course,
like
big
the
fans.
United Nations, only a lot more fun.
Completely. And I found myself, even though I had been a little bit skeptical about the Eurovision experience beforehand, I found myself really getting into it. And then sometimes I would sort of go back home to Jerusalem to visit with visit my family, and I made myself, I'm going to admit this, Sarah, I made myself a Eurovision playlist.
Yes.
So I wanted to know all the words to the songs, or at least be very familiar with them. Because you're not completely objective when it comes to Eurovision. You kind of have the songs that you feel really should be winning. So I've been a reporter for a long time, but it was quite an experience for me.
That's wonderful. And I think probably the fact that you come from another world that was never connected with this Eurovision world made your reporting so much richer. It was you wrote fantastically about it, and also it must have just been such an adventure. It was funny.
It was like basically taking a business trip. It was like being on this business trip in Tel Aviv. It was very odd. It was very bizarre and very fun, and sort of stepping outside yourself, which is what you do a lot as a reporter, and that's one of the things I love most about my job.
How did you get into reporting and journalism and editing to begin with? What brought you into this world?
I love writing. I love words. High school. I started in high school, and I was, the editor of my school newspaper, and then the editor of the yearbook. Yes. And then in college, I also wrote for my school newspaper. I went to a school called SUNY Binghamton. And I guess I always knew I wanted to be a reporter. I then I worked in publishing for a while, but I knew that I really wanted to get back into reporting. When I moved to Israel almost 25 years ago, I started working for Bloomberg Wire Services the first year that they opened in Tel Aviv. And I actually was a business writer for about 13 years.
Fantastic.
And then moved into freelancing and writing about other things, wrote a lot about high tech in the years that high tech was really starting out here. And when David Harvitz was starting the Times of Israel, we met to talk about what were different positions that were available. And I said, I only want to do culture and lifestyle. And he said, okay.
Fantastic.
So, my lucky day.
You're actually the first person I met on staff from Times of Israel, besides Eli Leshem, who was then the blog's editor when I came in to speak with David and speak with Linda about whether or not there were any job opportunities.
The Boots
and I
blog.
was so excited to meet you because I had been following your work, and I was a little starstruck when I walked in. Oh, it's Jessica Steinberg. So It's an honor to be your colleague and to be sitting here with you.
The feeling is mutual.
Thank you. Is there anything else that you have learned or experienced along the way in this country and in your travels through writing that you want to share with our community?
It's a great privilege to be a reporter. It's a great privilege to meet so many different people almost daily sometimes. Some weeks I am literally talking to new people all the time, and you are constantly, I call them creative entrepreneurs in a sense, but really it's just that every single person has a story.
Yes.
Every single person has a story. And, sometimes they're well known and sometimes they're not. And it is most definitely a privilege to write about people and their stories and let it unfold for myself first, and then be able to tell that story to so many people. Listen, there are some stories that you see that are obviously written about in every newspaper and every news site. And sometimes you get to write about something first, and sometimes you get to either share that first and others follow you, or you're somewhere in the middle of that news cycle of everyone writing about it, or sometimes you get to be the only person writing about it. But what I find also is that being